Welcome to the episode 0 of TLG Talks. This is going to be UCLA Esports new content. We're going to be doing 5 episodes, not including this episode. This is going to be episode 0. It's going to be slightly intro, and I'm going to be talking about kind of more like pro play and less related topics to the rest of the UCLA scene, just to kind of get you guys both like more knowledgeable about what we're going to be doing within this project. And then just to also like give like kind of my own insights. Me as my person, I am very big into League. Of course, you may know me from broadcasting many different UCLA games. I've also done tournament casting for SoCal Flowerfest and SoCal Snowdown, and then intramurals, of course. But besides that, I have a lot more to say about League than just the present game you may be watching. So this will be a good way for me to elaborate on some of my personal more so insights on the game, as well as to kind of hopefully share an image of what UCLA Esports, and especially the LoL team, is to the rest of the fan base. Because we may see them like in Instagram posts where we announce rosters, we may see them in Twitter headlines where we announce wins, and a few of us might even see the games live or go to the YouTube channel, which I recommend you do. Go to the YouTube, support the players, look at what they do. They're awesome. Please do that. But this hopefully will give a more human aspect. We will maybe get some laughs in. You'll learn more about who they are, their identity, their own insights into the game. And with all that, I really hope that this will be able to kind of enlighten people to just know more about who it is that is running UCLA Esports, who are our players, who are our coaches, analysts, etc. So this show, as I said, it's going to be bi-weekly. So this is going to be the pilot. It's episode 0, not really part of the main series. So currently it is week 10 of winter quarter, but the main series is going to be taking place over spring quarter. The intention is to do filming on the weeks that are odds, and then the uploads on the weeks that are evens. So hopefully you guys will be able to get an image every other week, starting at week 2 through week 10, and that'll be just your spring split TLG Talks show. Besides that, these talks are going to aim to be around 45 minutes in terms of pre-planned content. At the very least 30 minutes if we go really quickly for whatever reason that may be. Could be bad scheduling where people have to go, or just a matter of the questions were short and concise, or the answers were short and concise, and then it just happened to be shorter. But 45 minutes is the goal, but I would actually encourage all of my future guests to go longer than that. I feel like any amount of natural, free-flowing conversation is really healthy and really good for us, and it'll just help show off UCLA Esports. It's going to be very casual, as you can see. I'm not like really trying. I'm not reading off a script per se. I just have a bit of notes on my phone. This is like as much like regimentation there is. It's just I have notes on what we're going to talk about, and that's basically going to be the flow of all of these kind of interviews, podcasts, however you want to see them. We're going to be just kind of developing a natural conversation about League of Legends and about UCLA Collegiate League of Legends. So, as I mentioned already, it's going to be mostly centered around the team come the 1 through 5 episodes. Today is going to be the exception. And so, to get to know a bit more about myself, I kind of developed a kind of, it's not going to be terribly short, but it's going to be about someone primarily that I follow near religiously, not in a way that I take their word as the word of God, but just because I find their insights invaluable. And many of you will know this person. It is LS Nick Desessert. I think LS is one of the greatest contributors to the League pro scene, and of course that's what we're going to be focusing on today, as I'm alone and we're just going to get all the kinks out. We're going to test what it is to do this podcast. And so when I'm talking about LS, it's not going to be like this in the future episodes. We're going to be talking specifically about what I want to talk about specifically in the pro scene and the kind of the adjacent scenes to pro scene today. And so LS is going to be our primary choice of topic. And of course, many of you know him already, and his most recent like debacle, I guess one could say, where he got fired from C9 4 hours before he was supposed to be on stage coaching in like week 3 or 4 or something, which was completely like, I think week 3 probably, which was completely out of the blue. So, I mean, it's more known now, like things have slept through. Like Max Waldo mentioned how when you're taking over the head coach position, you're supposed to be able to do more than just what's in league. And I think this is actually really brilliant because when LS actually, or when LS was streaming last night, this is just how much I try to keep up with all the things going on in the league scene. He was watching the interview between Ashley Kang, I believe her name is, from Horizon, with Joe Marsh. And one of Joe Marsh's big things on why T1 is successful is the balance between work and play. So I think, as Max Waldo alluded to, when you have someone who's like cutthroat like LS, who's more focused on really trying to get to the next step, next level of League of Legends, you're not really going to have that humanist side. And I think that's probably one of the big reasons that's been alluded to for why he got kicked, even though certainty is out of the picture with all the NDAs. But like looking back to that interview with Joe Marsh, you hear about T1, and T1 is one of the best organizations in terms of facilities, amenities. I mean, they don't just have healthcare for their players, they have skincare. Like you get free face masks for being part of the team. It's like really wild when you think of what you're going to get out of a company. And so when you think of how these like affect players mentally, it's going to be a huge difference in terms of actual play. We can look back to week 3 when LS was removed and how the players lost to, I believe, Immortals. They won against TSM, but that's because everyone wins against TSM, so it's not really a good point to make. But when you lose to Immortals as Cloud9, as the first seed, second seed, however you want to put it between them and TL, going forward, you're really going to see that it's not a mechanics base, especially when you have someone like Summit, someone like Berserker, who are mechanically just ranks above the rest of the crowd. I mean, you're going to be looking at reasons of mental health. And I mean, we even saw the Leandries on Corki, which was like, Fudge said in an interview that it was a bad choice, but I mean, who's to say that that just wasn't a last shadow purchase? So like when we're thinking about these different like reasons of how you maintain a team at its top potential, you're going to really want to focus on both work and play, like you see at T1. And I think that's probably one of the factors that got LS suddenly kicked from C9 is that lack of play. The more so he was cutthroat. He even alluded to that when in review sessions, if players didn't play well, there was no sugarcoating. There just was LS let them have it. He was like, no, you played this wrong. You need to play this better. This was, I believe, in reference to it was one game in which one player was constantly inting, and I can't remember who was. Maybe it was in Face Check, and Dom basically said that, oh yeah, because Dom was saying how he had to do it himself, where you basically just tell that bad player who's always inting that it's not their fault and they have to keep it up just for the sake of mental. But when LS doesn't do this, you're going to see disruptions in the team chemistry, and it's going to affect the team overall. And so Joe Marsh, Jack Etienne, who I've actually come to understand maybe as the NA Ocelot, is probably going to be cognizant of how LS is mentally affecting the players, especially when people say, I mean, I guess you can't really say this is true or not because they might be scripted, but to say that when Fudge said it was for the best, you're really thinking that maybe it's either that he was forced to say that. We do know that Fudge and LS are still great friends, but that's like kind of irrelevant when you're thinking about winning. And so when you're thinking of Jack Etienne as the Ocelot of the NA, you're going to say that he's going to have the foresight, he's going to try to look into the future and see what makes his odds the best at winning. And Max Waldo is a highly cooperative and highly personable person as opposed to LS, who's going to be only focused about the game. He only ever focuses about the game, and you know this because he literally lives online and he's only talking about the game. That is if he's not trying to sell like a Black Lotus or something. But when you think about this, it's going to be hugely impactful for the team. And so Jack Etienne probably kicked him out for those reasons. He just wasn't going to suffice as a head coach. He could have stayed as a coach in a different position, but we know that LS would not have accepted that. LS would need to have complete control of the business of team building, of team management for him to continue going on. And I think that's just probably the C9 fiasco summed up pretty well. Let me see if I missed anything here. So I guess one thing to note is LS does have quite the history of literally being kind of more on the aggressive side, not really sparing words. Of course, he even admits to it himself, but like we have instances like with Malice. I'm not sure what's right here, especially when you have Crucial in the picture, because I've heard very iffy things about the way these two retell these stories and that they're actually one-sided, but I'm not sure. I'm just going to say that what I heard is that according to Malice and Crucial, they were invited to Korea by LS, and then when arriving to Korea, they weren't given accommodations, and then when Malice refused to level up with LS for an account, when Malice had very little time left in Korea, Malice was like, no, I can't do this, I have to keep going, I have to get a higher rank. And this is like one of the issues that they had. LS got really mad and kicked him out. And so when you're thinking that someone already had to spend half a month's worth of rent when they're not making any money otherwise, they're pretty much already working day to day, getting whatever they make from streaming, and that's what they work with. Like Malice, this means a lot, and I understand why Malice. And of course, he says that Malice is able to work with LS and appreciate LS as someone in League who's talented without thinking good of him, without thinking LS is a good person. And of course, Malice always says that his wife, I believe, is never going to forgive LS for what he's done. Similarly, we had the story with Nemesis. Nemesis was actually supposed to join LS going to Cloud9. And what ended up happening is, of course, Nemesis thought it would fall, it would turn into a fire. And of course, that's what ended up happening in terms of LS being there. But Nemesis just didn't want to go. LS got really upset. LS just blew up on Nemesis, saying that, why aren't you joining me? You should join me. And of course, it's known that since then, Nemesis hasn't responded to LS. LS, for these reasons, very brutal. But I don't think he's uncaring. Like, when you think about these stories, LS always gives high praise to Malice, always gives high praise to Nemesis, saying Nemesis and Fudge are the two best Western mids, and that it's interchangeable which one could be better than the other. And that's like a lot when you're coming from the LS perspective, who's hugely hypercritical. LS, kind of like Malice, doing the same thing, working with LS at Cloud9, even through their distaste for, or Malice's distaste for LS. LS is able to work with people who may think lowly of him, so long as he thinks they're meritorious, which I think is actually kind of admirable about LS as a person. Going further, let's see what we have here. So I guess the next thing on the list here, so of course, especially with the Nemesis thing, LS really feels bad about this kind of treatment of Nemesis, and I definitely understand how LS would want to repair these relationships. I don't think it's really hard seeing that, knowing that Nemesis for close to 6 months now, I think, has just cut ties with LS. And so when you're thinking about this, especially when Nemesis is already pretty successful off at Gen G, it's hard to validate any reason why he would return to LS, which it's definitely curious to me to willingly shut out someone you were very close to, and not just that, but someone who's so big and so influential of your own regard. I definitely think for this reason, Nemesis was either brutally mistreated by LS here, it must have been days of slander, or maybe behind the scenes LS isn't as big as he is in front of the curtains. There's a lot going on there that can be depacked. I haven't put too much thought into that. My important note on that is just how LS still sees through, kind of like how Malice still sees through when it comes to understanding players' strength are not tied to the player's behavior. Similarly, I think this was an issue long ago when LS defended Malice. He got a lot of flame for that, although Malice was, I think he did do something that was wrong at the time. LS was not aware of it and defended him on the basis of who he is as a person. So yeah, I definitely think LS is probably not someone you would consider normally, with a normal emotional distribution, but definitely someone with heightened emotions. I mean, it's quite obvious if you look at him through his stream. He's very stressed out easily. He's very hyper, not hyper in the sense of energetic, but in the sense that he gets elevated emotions very quickly, and he's either really, really on top of things or really, really sad and depressed. And I think it's kind of in nature with his character that his altercations would be as drastic as they are. So now, not so much talking about LS, but talking about the following LS has come to have. Of course, we know it most certainly as the Church of LS. And then, of course, you have like the related figures. Something I'm actually very surprised of is just some person, I don't know who they are, but on Twitter, they're the Church of Chovy, and they're like actually everywhere on like general esports headlines. So like when LS tweets, when Vega V2 tweets, when, I don't know, LPL tweets, something like of that nature, you often see Church of Chovy, which of course is a reference to LS giving very high praises to Chovy over the past 2 years. I think it's since diminished come the Worlds. Of course, Chovy is known in the season not to do the 30 CS gap that Chovy has been historically known for. I think that's, of course, in part to Faker really being much better than he was last year, I think, is a good way to put it. And then also just general changes on the map. So, of course, TP changes really affected the game and made it really difficult to do certain things. You can't just tower dive or counter tower dive like you used to. And then, of course, what was brought up by Dom, I think, on a stream, I don't remember which one, is you can't, as a mid laner, you can't freeze waves to teleport anymore, which, of course, I think is probably one of the most missed out effects of the teleport changes, was how like necessary teleport was to keep a wave from really screwing itself up. And I think all these different things that you don't really notice for the first time when you're looking at how the teleport changes may have affected something. It's definitely difficult to kind of grasp all the nuances at the start. But like when you think of the game, it's not as straightforward as it used to be. There's the way teleports changed. At first, the map kind of was like an issue with Chemtech Drake. Of course, that's since removed. But like the game is somehow very different while also mundanely the same as it was last season. I mean, we've got very little changes. We got Crown and what? Crown. Was there even anything else we really got in terms of items? I don't know if Hullbreaker wasn't that new. It was Crown and I think there was something else. I mean, like, to just emphasize how, like, lame the changes were, I can't even think of what else there was, if there even was anything else added after Crown, which, of course, would be just another example of how bad the changes were, or how little, not bad necessarily, but how little the changes were. I mean, you really had a season 11 to season 12 shift that did nothing but stunt the game, I guess, is the best way to say it, with the teleport changes. So we're going to see like gameplay effects, of course, come from these. And with Chovy not being as good, this was actually a wild tangent, by the way. I never meant to go into this, but it's just how things go here. Tangents are TLG talks, that's for sure. But back on track, you have a lot of these people that are kind of amassing like this fan like hood of LS, and they're not like LS. And I think that's very crucial to note. They're not like LS. There's a lot of fans who are in love with LS, not like LS. And what I mean here is that they will say ride or die whatever LS says. And that's really bad. That's really bad, especially when you consider that it's like almost the opposite message of what LS asks. It's like basically the best way to say it is that LS has a fan base of meta slaves who follow LS bashing on meta slaves. I mean, even we see in LS's recent patch notes is that he basically says that why is Jinx Aphelios getting nerfed instead of pro players getting smarter and picking specific mage matchups bot lane. We know Aphelios historically has done horrible into mages. It's just not one of his things that he can deal with as a like anti-bruisery, more so ADC. And then of course Jinx, if Jinx is able to get popped from range, the difference of an ADC matchup isn't really like there anymore. I mean, you're thinking Jinx beats a lot of matchups because she's able to out attack speed and out range and then eventually out damage. But when you have a mage, that doesn't really make the same deal. I mean, historically, I feel like Ziggs Syndra were pretty common ADC mages. Cassiopeia was a big one. I don't know how I don't think Cassiopeia in her current state with of course, the changed Seraphs, I mean, like from long ago where they got rid of the shield, that affects her kind of greatly. I don't think the new items really recover much for her so far. But like, there are historically mages that were supposed to be really good as ADCs that we're not seeing, or APCs would be more accurate. And I think that's a big problem going forward, is that, as LS says, we have too much meta slaving, and then metas get forced by riot changes rather than changed naturally through like innovation, curiosity. But when we're talking about the fans of LS, they're just the same. They're meta slaves. They're the people that are playing Aphelios and Jinx and saying like that, and then not counterpicking or whatever. They're not doing anything different. I think this is like really important to note, and this is one of the things that we saw brutal effects of both at the C9 fiasco, where LS was suddenly kicked, and even farther back when there was the thing that was unknown about T1 LS head coach. Of course, it was like a span of 2 months. I think it started in September, like end of September, and of course LS came back online around like November 10th, 2020, maybe, I think. And then, of course, it was more so revealed that it was him basically deciding, do I want to be head coach of T1? And I'll get actually more into that in a bit, but does he want to be head coach of T1, or does he want to be content creator for T1? And he's always said publicly that he wants to be a content creator so he can have the farthest outreach for his views, which is a very big thing on LS. He wants to help shape and help reshape, specifically alter the pro scene, alter what's meta, find answers. And so what we see is that people, of course, jump to conclusions. There were the 2 months where T1 was being boycotted, to the 2 weeks. No, not even. It was like a week for Cloud9. Cloud9 was a really quick fiasco. But 1 week of Cloud9 where boycott Cloud9. A lot of people saying, oh, LCS is no longer fun. I think that was mostly a European comeback. Was I don't have a reason to watch LCS anymore because LS isn't there. And these are like really toxic fan base attitudes. They're jumping to conclusions and they're doing predetermined like conclusions. Or I guess that's the same thing. But basically it's not how you should act. And it's particularly interesting how someone like LS, who is so keen on we need more data. This was actually something shadowed by Nemesis with the upset drama at Worlds. Nemesis said he doesn't know if it's family drama. It could be something completely different, and then it's management handling it, saying it's family drama. What be it? Of course, we've come to know after the Adam tweets that Upset legitimately had family issues, and they were shared between, I think, Yamato and someone else in the org, and it was like legitimized. He had every reason to be excused. People don't even bash him for it anymore. They just say he's so Chad that he skips his first Worlds knowing he'll go to his second the next year. So like when you're thinking about these people that are so quick to bash, it's really not representative of who LS is. And I think one of the things to do is that when you're looking at these like really influential people, you can't look at them through these lenses that these fans have. They're awful. You have to look at LS through the pros and cons. You can't take him as an angel. The church symbology really does not help with this, because who's the head of the church? Not the Pope, it's God. Does that mean LS is God? Like, this is horrible imagery that that the fan base is instilling in themselves. And it's really toxic for like the community in general. We should not be having conversations saying, but LS said this. It's like, no, if LS said something, you can say it yourself, but you have to have your own reasons for it. I mean, currently we're having this duanal debate between Dantes and Malice and LS. Well, LS, he's not even part of it, he's just the bigger name, so he's being put into it. Where, what do you build on Hecarim? I mean, if you're into auto attackers, AD, you go Frozen Heart, according to Malice. If you're not, if you're in Dante's ballpark, you go Randuin's, or you go Death's Dance. Right? I think Death's Dance is much more popular. Randuin's I only see being something that would be used as like a specific for a like Yasuo Yone, in addition to an ADC. I really don't think you go Randuin. Randuin's is such an awful item. Yeah, don't go Randuin's. Off topic though. But yeah, we see in these debates how like there's not much thinking when you have people say, but LS said. And it's really important that we kind of work on critical thinking. And I think that's the biggest thing for LS is open mind, critical thinking. And if you can get this done, if you can keep engaging with your own opinions and your own reasoning, this is huge between Vagar V2 and RJS, who I will be going into detail in a bit. But Vagar V2's whole deal is that he and RJS are complaining, biscuits, Scorch, why? Why do you need them? And RJS is like, well, you need them because you die. And Vagar's like, but I don't. And then you have that whole scuffle. And it's like, well, reason. But no one's doing it. They're just going to say, conclusion is da-da-da-da. Or this one said da-da-da. And this is especially particular with RJS, which we'll be going into in a bit. So, yeah, definitely the cult aspect of LS is really, like, not good. I mean, yeah, he's not who a lot of people, or he's not really well represented by his own fan base, which I think is really weird when you think about how many people are inspired by him and then go against his word. It's like, why?
The video may be over, but the episode has not reached its conclusion. Make sure to come back next week to catch the second part to this episode of TLG Talks, and thank you for watching.